Hey folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania we're looking at Lucio Fulci's splatter-filled Zombie, or Zombie 2, or if you're going by its best title, Zombie Flesh Eaters. I mean, why wouldn't you just call it that? The film gained its Zombie 2 title in Italy, that being Zombie with just one eye, because the film's producers were trying to capitalise on the success of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which in Italy had just been called Zombie. The film was initially offered to Inglourious Basterds director Enzo G. Castorelli, but he turned it down because he didn't want to do horror movies, and thus the project ended up with Lucio Fulci. But rather than just make a straight rip-off, Fulci and co made something that I think deserves its own moment in the spotlight. The plot kicks off when a sailboat drifts into the New York harbour. On board is one stowaway zombie. And yes, this film does actually refer to them as zombies. There's no ghouls or anything going on here. After that zombie kills one of the harbour patrol and then is dunked into the sea, you start to get the sense that there's going to be a zombie pandemic going on in the city. But actually, the plot follows a news reporter and the daughter of the missing boat captain as they travel to the island that he'd set sail from in hopes of finding him. But as you can probably guess, when they get there, they just find an island filled with zombies. To be honest, the plot's pretty simple and it's nothing that you're going to really be fascinated by. It's just a pretty cool concept to go to a nice location, and you would find that a lot of Italian zombie films would use this setup from now on. But that doesn't really matter. The plot of the film is just really an excuse to get from one fantastic zombie set piece to another. And oh boy, does this film have some of the best zombie set pieces. I mean, if you've ever come across this film, you will probably know of the two key sequences. The first, and probably most famous, I think it even got into a Microsoft advert, is that there is a scene in which a zombie fights a shark. A real shark. The other key sequence is a scene that involves the usual bit of Lucio Fulci violence, in which a woman's eye is dragged towards a big giant splinter. And I'll be honest with you, I was expecting these scenes to be a lot worse than I was remembering them in terms of quality. I think I first saw this as a teenager and you're like, oh my god, there's a bit with a shark and there's the eye bit, and it would just be sort of this overwhelming gore thing. And I was thinking, they're not going to be that good when I go back, and oh boy, they are really, really good still. And to be honest though, the whole film is much better than I remember it being. I think like the opening with the sailboat was genuinely quite eerie, and I don't remember it being that way. I think it's one of those things where you have to take yourself back to seeing something for the first time. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that actually you still have this sort of sense of anticipation when you watch it on a second go round, because whilst the first time you watch it a lot of the scenes are really tense and they're incredibly well sort of built up, because the film is so gory and the gore is so good, when you watch it a second time or a third time or probably like an eighth time or whatever it is I'm on now, you just have this sort of butterflies like, oh, we're gonna get to see that bit soon. And what you are getting to see is some of the best gore of this sort of era of Italian splatter. I mean, the film really does earn being on the Video Nasties list, or the fact that when you saw it in cinemas you got a bath bag with it. I mean, even the zombie makeup is, in my mind, really fantastic. I know there are people that aren't quite as keen on the zombies in this film. They've got sort of quite a lot of I presume, like, probably modelling clay stuck to them to give them these sort of flaky, fleshy wounds. But I really like the style that they have. They have this very earthy quality. They do look like people who've been buried and got up. And I don't know, there's just something actually quite distressing about them. They have this sort of demonic quality. The idea of designing them this way was to give them a more sort of voodoo feel compared to the sort of science zombies that we were getting at this point. I mean, that's why nearly every zombie in the film has its eyes closed and they have their head down and they have their arms by their side. It was to sort of give it that voodoo vibe. And I just think they look great. I mean, there's a shot where there's like 4 of them sat round eating someone. It has this very painterly quality. It sort of reminded me of like a Goya black painting style. And, I mean, at least they're not bright blue like they are in Dawn of the Dead. I mean, what is less amazing is all of the acting and the characters in this film. I mean, our hero, I mean, he's not even really a hero. Peter West, the news reporter, is played by Ian McCulloch, who would pop up in a lot of Italian horror at this point. And he does his usual sort of a bit smug, bit cocky shtick here. I mean, he's a likeable enough presence, but he doesn't really get that much to do. And as I said, he's not that heroic. Like, shoots a couple of zombies at the end, but don't really do anything. His sort of love interest, Anne, played by Tisa Farrow, sister of Mia Farrow, has fantastic eyes, but has no personality. But this is a Fulci film, so I presume he saw her eyes and went, she'll do. Similarly, Brian is the sort of more action hero character, but he delivers everything with a monotone and has a beard. That's about his personality. And his wife Susan has the charisma of a potato.
Now, whatever it is, it makes the dead stand up and walk.
The only really interesting character is Dr. Menard, who, as played by Richard Johnson, gives this sort of very sweaty, very tired, browbeaten performance, and you do get the sense of someone who's been stuck on an island full of zombies and is as much just fed up with it rather than scared anymore. So much of this isn't really helped by the fact that the audio is all done post-synced because the actors were both speaking English and Italian in the same scenes, and I think a lot of nuance is probably missing in the dubbing, and some scenes are so out of sync it's unintentionally hilarious. With this in mind, it's probably a good thing that the film looks as good as it does. I mean, once you get to the island settings that were shot on Santo Domingo, the film really does look great. I mean, I can imagine that a lot of the cast were very happy to film in these locations and to go and lie down on lovely palm tree beaches between shots.
That's not a cool place to hit. Natives claim it's cursed.
As well, the film never shies away from the gore. You get a lot of great close-ups on either, you know, bleeding neck wounds or on a lot of the zombies. I mean, to be honest, I'd want to get a close-up of a zombie covered in worms. You do get some quite strange sort of Michael Myers-esque POV shots that have like the sort of heavy breathing that comes with that. And that's really weird because it makes the zombies look like they're sort of skulking around in the dark. And in one scene it makes them look really pervy, which is quite strange. But all of this just adds to the fact that the film feels like this weird sort of off-brand version of a zombie film. The soundtrack is similarly fantastic. I mean, I would argue that the main theme in this is one of the best horror movie themes ever. And I'm sure I'm going to upset someone by saying this, but I think the main theme here is better than a lot of the music in Dawn of the Dead. I'm really sorry. I mean, Italy at this point is so good at producing horror movie composers. And I think Fabio Frizzi's work here is right up there with everyone else. I have to say, watching this brand new 4K restoration, the film really does look great. I mean, putting this film through 4K scanner and putting it on a really fancy Blu-ray seems illogical, but when you watch it, you can see so much detail in the effects, and you can really make out things like the fact that Ian McCulloch's hairline is absolutely appalling. I mean, I just spent most of the film distracted by thinking, why has no one told him to just cut that off? It's awful. But I mean, a lot of the night photography in the film looks really good. There was one shot, especially in the New York stuff, that I was just like, wow, this really looks up there with what, you know, really big budget films at the time looked like. And the film's sort of big fiery finale just does look astonishing. It really pops. The flames look great. I think a lot of this applies to the soundtrack as well. I mean, it feels like there's so much more bass being added to the sound, including in like gunshots or explosions, or when you do hear that fire at the end. But as well, the soundtrack, like the kick drum that starts at the start of the theme, is just, it really does feel like a sort of heartbeat. Feel it in your chest. And I do think if you watched this and really cranked up the volume, it would be a heck of an experience. I think this film really is wonderful, and I know that there are people out there that really love Fulci, but I don't think he really gets the respect that he perhaps deserves when you compare him with people like Argento or Bava that were working at the same time. I think Zombi or Zombie Flesh Eaters, or whatever you want to call it, really does show that he's one of the best horror directors working in that era. I mean, some of the sequences in this, some of the suspense sequences or the gore sequences, they are some of the best you can find at this time, and I think he deserves so much more credit than he gets. That being said, I'm not trying to say that this is a really highbrow film that you need to look at and be serious about. I mean, it's just a heck of a good time. Like, the gore is great, and it's gratuitous, and it's a bit ridiculous, and you know, you get the usual bits where they decide to put some titty on screen because they can. And I mean, the dialogue's pretty atrocious, and the dubbing makes it even worse, but that just all makes it a really good time. It's just a great film to just sit and watch. And you can watch it as a great film, or you can watch it and have a laugh with your friends. It kind of works. It's an all-purpose film. It's an all-purpose horror film. And I think if you have seen it before, it does stand up to being watched again, and I would recommend getting that new 4K version just so that you can see how amazing it looks. It is the uncut version, so you get a lot more sort of lingering on the gory shots. But if you haven't seen it and you like zombies, what are you doing? Go and watch it. It's brilliant. But that's just my opinion. What do you think of Zombie? Do you think it should just be called Zombie Flesh Eaters everywhere? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so that you don't miss any more videos, and I'll see you next time.